It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about in the news, lots about people being fired for not being vaccinated. Now, here's the thing. I know what it's like to be fired. I have been fired before. It's happened a number of times. Generally, they come in and go, there's the door, get out, don't come back. Because you did something wrong. You broke something, you didn't show up, whatever. What we're seeing right now is not employers firing people as much as we're going, sorry, the law is what it is. You have not complied. In fact, the big story was we're going to see all of these police and all these firefighters and all these military personnel and all these nurses. They're all going to get fired. There's going to be a mass exodus. I guess one state trooper in Massachusetts. I guess 150 employees at the Christiana Care Hospital and I guess 175 in North Carolina. But the headline, oh my goodness, the headline, Christiana Care fires 150 employees for not complying with COVID vaccine mandate. Now you go, oh my God, 150 people got fired. This is a 906-bed, 1.3 million square foot facility with more than 10,000 employees. So out of 10,000 employees plus, 150 of them failed to get the vaccine. I'm sorry, I don't know that should have been the blaring headline. I don't know that the giant, bold type North Carolina hospital system fires about 175 workers in one of the largest ever mass terminations due to vaccine mandate. You go, hold on. The hospital system they're talking about in North Carolina, 3 times as big as the one in Delaware, 35,000 employees, 35,000 plus, and you've got 175? And that gets the headline? This is the craziness of where we are. This is the insanity of this whole scenario. You've got a handful of people who are gumming it up for everybody else. And we've got a media structure that they love the fight. They love to keep people all, I got to buy the paper. I got to read it. I got to know. When the reality is we're talking about a slim minority. A slim minority of the people who are boogering it up for everybody else. And this is where I'm struggling in this moment to really kind of care. Because what we know is people right now, man, we're tired. We're tired of the masks. We're tired of the looking and seeing the number of deaths going up, the number of people being hospitalized, and the number of ICU beds going down, the restrictions, and just tired of it, man. Tired of it. And the thing is we lived through years of the right-wing loons telling people, F your feelings. Well, you know what? It seems that is boomeranged back as the majority of us are now saying, F your hesitancy. We want our lives back. We want to get somewhere back to the normal place. And you're the one standing in the way. You're the one screwing it up for everyone else. So you didn't get fired. You made a choice. And that choice came with a consequence. This is what the choice people want. You have a choice to go somewhere else. And I've been saying this for years on a bunch of topics. I have people say, well, I should never have to join a union. You don't have to. You can leave. And this is the same thing. In a workplace where the vast majority of people want to be safe, the vast majority of people do not want to be around unvaccinated people who could conceivably get them sick. Don't want it. Don't need it. It's a consequence. So they weren't fired. They made a choice. So this is my problem with some of the dishonest headline writing that we see. They weren't fired. If they get the vaccine, yes, they can come back. Generally, that's how it works. These companies don't want to get rid of people. They're having a hard enough time finding people to come to work. But ultimately, this is a moment where if we're not going to be big boys and girls, if we're not going to be responsible, somebody has to. And this is where Biden's mandate, and I think it's the right choice. I think he did the right thing. This emergency temporary standard that they've issued through the Department of Labor, through Occupational Safety and Health, is saying, look, we got to protect people in the workplace. I've been saying this from the start, that we needed OSHA to have a policy to make sure that there's a ground floor. That when you come to work, just like with any number of things, chemical exposure, making sure that there are safety guards on machinery, any of that stuff, that workers are protected when they come to work. And Biden's plan is any private employer with more than 100 employees got to get vaccinated. Got to do it, or you've got to get tested weekly. They threw that in there as well. And as I said, this is something that is long overdue. Now, there are people saying, well, we'll sue, and I assume they will. But again, this is another one of those things where now you're looking at the Supreme Court and going, do they undo 116 years of decided law and overturn what was the Jacobson versus Massachusetts case that said, yeah, we can vaccinate people like they did against smallpox during an epidemic? Can do that. No, you have the choice. You have choice. I'm not in favor of holding anybody down and jamming them in the arm. I'm not in favor of tricking them into it. You got to want to protect yourself. But ultimately, if it comes down to your rights superseding my rights, we have a problem. And this is where we are. The vast majority of people, 77% of people in this country who are eligible to get the shot have gotten at least one of them. That means 23% across the whole population. And in healthcare, we're talking a small sliver, an incredibly small minority. And this is one of those things where if I'm going to the hospital, and this is where hospitals, I think, are different, schools as well. I think hospitals are different in the place where these are people who already have major problems. These are people who have, immune problems. These are folks who have comorbidities. These are problems who are already struggling. And now you're going to introduce someone who might be dangerous to them. It makes no sense. And like I said, I've been saying all along, capitalism is deciding, because these employers don't want these people around patients, because that means lawsuits. If they allow unvaccinated people into the hospital, someone gets it, and, well, lawsuits. This is where, if we can't be big boys and girls, capitalism decides. Now, what they're saying is Biden's mandate is going to affect somewhere around 80 million people who work in employers that employ more than 100 people. Going to be interesting to see where this plays out. Now, what we know is, like I said, people are fed up. People are tired, and it's getting worse. I just saw this annual Women in the Workplace report from McKinsey and Company and leanin.org. And what they found is, last year you had people who were, women were about 32% of them were burnt out. Men, about 28% were burnt out. This year, that number has jumped to 42% of women, 35% of men, because it's getting much harder in the workplace. You hear these stories of people at Walmart or fast food restaurants or restaurants, just any of these, the customers always right nonsense places where these people feel entitled to beat up on these workers. They've had enough of it, and they're fed up with it. And this, again, is where, one, as somebody who firmly believes in the right of workers to collectively bargain and fight for better wages, hours, conditions, but also having a voice and protection is a huge part of this. No worker should be abused in the workplace. No worker should be talked down to, yelled at, belittled. Any of the things that we see coming out of these vax holes. I'm really I'm really struggling with that. And here's the thing: we're going to be getting on a plane not too long. I'm waiting for one of these anti-mask idiots to just pop off for no reason. What interesting sidebar? Marjorie Taylor Greene caught wearing a mask at an airport. Shows that she's not a complete and total pain in the neck all the time. So that's a good thing. There could be progress. Could be. But I look at this and we're in this moment. And what's frustrating is there are those minority, the loudest minority, who want to keep us, all bunched up. And understand, this has now become solely political in my mind. I don't buy anymore that people have this hesitancy. I think it's now a political stance more than a health stance. This is now political stuff. This is now the Republican Party, feeding these folks and wanting to make sure that they're angry, because they need the anger. They need the right wing needs the rage machine needs it. They need the grievance. They need the issue. But here's the thing: the majority of people not with them on this. The majority of the people want to get back to life the way it used to be, where we didn't have to worry who was standing behind us in line, where we didn't have to worry about our kids going to school because, well, some idiot has decided, no, I want to see my beautiful child smile because we're drenched in the blood of Jesus, or whatever voodoo they claim to believe. All because they don't want to wear a mask. So here in the state of Pennsylvania, our Republican-led Senate, which has gone, pretty much full-on crazy, passed today a piece of legislation, Senate Bill 846, sponsored by the guy who went down to the insurrection, Senator Doug Mastriano, and Judy Ward. It came out of the Education Committee, and what it will do, if they get it passed through the full Senate, and I believe they will, it's going to give parents, or the guardians of kids, the ability to opt their children out of mask mandates. No health reasons. No, they don't even have to make up a religious reason. They've just decided that they've done their research, mouth gaping on YouTube, saw a post on Facebook, someone sent them something by carrier pigeon, whatever. But they've decided that no, not gonna let them wear a mask, and that they should be unleashed on the rest of our kids, so that they're going to be able to decide over the school. Now, again, this will get vetoed, because this is more of that politicization. This is more of the Republicans going, no, we need to feed more red meat. We need to get these people angrier and angrier so that they keep giving us money and we keep being torn apart. But stop and think about what the intent of this legislation is. The ability to say, you know what? We're above your rules. We're above sanity. We're above common science. That someone who probably barely passed high school biology is now, they're now the ones who are going to decide. And be free of consequence. Look, if you don't want your kid to wear a mask, there's a process for that. You can educate them at home. You can send them to parochial school. You can send them to a private school. You can do all kinds of things. You have choices. And there are consequences with those choices. But to say that we're going to opt our kids out so that your kids are going to be less safe is insane. But this is what the current Republican Party believes. And it's not all of them. Or it'll be interesting to find out if it is. I hope it's not all of them. I'm hoping there are still some in that party who go, you know what, public health kind of is important. The general welfare, kind of something that we need to look out for. Now, I also find it interesting that they have simultaneously moved along with this. And this is the part that I go, aha, here it is. They want to move money away from the school districts. They have moved on House Bill 1254 here in Pennsylvania that would take money away from property taxpayers through public education and subsidize what they are calling education coupons. Not quite a voucher. It is. It's a voucher. But they've got a new name for it. It's a new name. They've rebranded the bad idea of school vouchers, and now we're calling them school coupons. Yeah. And again, this is to feed their ideology. This is to feed their ideological donors. This is about getting public money. And again, this is brilliant. Never let a good crisis go to waste. This is about taking public school money and handing it over to religious organizations. That's the end game. So when you stop and you look at all this stuff and you go, it's always the money. Really, it is. And it never gets any more difficult than it's always about the money. It's always about following the paper trail and into whose pocket it goes. And for me, this looks like, well, pretty simple. We're going to inflame parents over the mask issue. When we know that in those kind of environments, good ventilation in the classroom, social distancing, the masks, it works. And in fact, I give my local school district credit. According to my kids, the kids in the school are doing a great job of making sure that they wear their masks. They do the social distance. Because guess what? The kids, they don't want to go back. They don't want to go back to virtual. They don't want to go back to sitting in their room 20 hours a day. They want to be in school. So if this is what it's going to take, the kids are smarter than the parents. And I got to wonder, it's one of those moments where I wonder if you're one of the parents who goes, no, we shall not wear masks. If the kid wears the mask to school, does the kid get in trouble? I mean, how weird of a society have we become when the kids seem to be a lot smarter than the parents? Or at least our Republican leaders, who, again, it really is about the money. Education coupons? Couldn't you come up with something else? Is this one of those things where they looked up in the thesaurus and go, oh, what's a different word for voucher that somebody might not get? Very, very bizarre. But look, it is Senator Doug Mastriano who evidently, it's claimed that, borrowed some material for his book from other places. I guess that's a nice way of saying it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day the Delano Grape strike began in California. The strike came a year after activists had forced Congress to end the Bracero contract labor program. The Filipino Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, led by Larry Italong, Philip Vera Cruz, and others, called the strike against the Delano growers and the Coachella Valley grape growers. It had been a record harvest. Farm workers demanded higher wages, humane working conditions, and union recognition. When the growers refused, thousands walked out of the fields. A week later, the Mexican-American National Farm Workers Association, led by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, joined the strike. It was a historic moment. Within a year, the two unions would merge to form the United Farm Workers. The union sent strikers to the Oakland docks to persuade the longshoremen not to load non-union grapes. Many of the Filipino workers in the San Joaquin Valley worked in the Alaska fish canneries organized by the ILWU in the off-season. And so the ILWU honored their union brothers' request. Thousands of cases of grapes were left to rot on the docks. This initial victory led Chavez to organize a grape boycott against heavyweights DiGiorgio and Shenley Industries. 6 months into the strike, union leaders marched 300 miles from Delano to Sacramento to bring attention to their struggle. They hoped to pressure growers to the negotiating table and legislators to act on their behalf. For 5 years, the strike and boycott continued with marches, organizing, and picket line arrests. Gradually, the UFW began winning higher wages, union recognition, and hiring halls. Finally, in 1970, a collective bargaining agreement covering 10,000 workers was reached.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So let the fun begin. That's right. The fun is clock ticking. Tick, tick, tick. We're closing in on another government shutdown. Thank you, GOP. We're just hours away from running out of money to pay the bills for the money that we've already spent. This is the weird part for me, because this isn't say, hey, we're going to argue over spending. This is to say, no, we're just not going to pay the bills. That's how freaky this is. So it looks like Mitch McConnell and the GOP have set hell-bent on another 800,000 government workers working without a paycheck because, last night they decided all 50 of them, they are going to block a temporary funding extension that would keep our government open just a couple more days. So it looks like maybe the end of the week we could have a fun weekend. And here's some thoughts on what kind of a weekend to expect. I've asked our good friend Phil Glover to come talk with us. Phil is the Vice President of District 3 of the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE. Phil, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate you having me back.
So am I getting this right? We're ticking down. The clock is ticking to what I think most of us expect will be the next shutdown.
Yeah, midnight on the 1st. Basically, funding ends, the first day of the fiscal year is October 1st. They're supposed to have all of the appropriation bills done, and they're supposed to have all the funding in place for the next year. And that hasn't happened, of course. And so now we're going to sit here and wait to see the machinations of Congress and see what happens to our members. Basically, we're at their mercy again.
It's crazy to me. And as I said at the beginning here, the sad reality is this isn't fighting over spending. The money's already been allocated. We've already gone through the process where you should have fought over this. This is now just saying, no, we're going to punish people who have really nothing to do with it because we've got some weird political position that I don't even know why this time. Look, I understood some of the other ones. You go back to the ticking bomb of the Obama era. They wanted sequester. They wanted some pound of flesh. I'm not seeing what this pound of flesh is just yet.
No, I mean, the debt ceiling debate, number one, it's very, it's so complicated. It's not a bumper sticker, right? But, in 2019, they did a 2-year deal to extend the debt limit. Everybody voted for it. There wasn't any, nobody tried to hold it up. This was under the previous administration. And so we piled on all kind of debt. And obviously under COVID, we've had to pile on some debt to take care of people and do the things that need to be done. And now we're not going to pay for it, basically. And we're going to tie it to the, we don't want to pay workers. And we're going to tie it together to where, we're not going to get paid. Debt ceiling's not going to get taken care of. So everybody loses.
Yeah.
No, and that's where we are.
No, and it's crazy. I mean, I have a friend who was a former congressman who says, this used to be a yawn vote. We already spent the money. It has to be done. And it's his view. We shouldn't even have a debt ceiling because the time to fight over this stuff is, like you would do in your household. If you're bumping up, near a certain spot, maybe you think about, arguing over the spending instead of, well, how do we pay for it? Maybe we argue that first and then it'll take care of itself down the road.
Well, exactly. I mean, the appropriation bills are I think a lot of them are done. I mean, for many of the issues of government, Department of Defense, VA, a lot of those are put together. The House has passed a number of them, but here we are again, at the deadline, and we're just, our members, we're just sick of it. I mean, frankly, I don't care anymore who's responsible. The adults better get in a room and try to figure out how to fix this because it's not right that members that work in TSA and Bureau of Prisons and Border Patrol and VA and everywhere else across government have to worry about putting gas in their tank to go to work, because they're all going to get ordered to go to work every day. And they don't get to stay home. You know, these congressmen want to talk about a vacation for federal workers when these government shutdowns happen. You know, there's a lot of worry, a lot of, you know, consternation, a lot of problems, you know, with people having to pay their bills if you start missing paychecks.
Yeah, no.
And,
And we saw that. We saw that back during the former guy's term, because
we had a 35-day shutdown, and that shutdown. And I just kind of, you know, for this interview, I kind of went back. $11 billion it cost the economy, that 35-day shutdown. And here we are again playing around with this. You know, and back then, all these members of Congress from each side of the aisle, oh, we're never going to do this again. This was a clear warning. We shouldn't do it. And here we are again. So it's just time that these people take that aside, fund government, pay the government workers, and get this settled. Deal with policy issues in some other form, some other fashion.
Yeah, you hold maybe beat up on somebody else, because this is another one of those scenarios where, you know, the people who have the least ability to control their destiny are the ones who this is being taken out on, and it is really just a purely political move. And you know, but here's the thing, and I go back to, and the reason I brought up the former guy is, you know, the reality is they raised the debt, you know, in enormous amounts. Even without the pandemic, they were still $1 trillion plus debt in deficits every year. And then you throw the pandemic money on it, I think it was almost $8 trillion that they added. And the Democrats didn't do this kind of scorched earth scenario stuff that we're seeing out of the Republicans. So for me, I come back to this idea that this is just about slowing down the infrastructure bill, slowing down the Build Back Better plan. This is their only way to hold things up and to grind government to a halt so nothing gets done, so they can have a political advantage next year.
And I think a lot of our members like to look at this and say, well, it's both sides. It's both sides. In that case, in the 2019 debt ceiling bill, when that was all put into the budget, the Democrats didn't stomp their feet and say, no, we're not going to raise the debt ceiling. They came up with a plan. They agreed with the Republicans to do it. This is Mitch McConnell. This is classic McConnell. When there's a Democratic president, this is what he does. And the Democrats generally don't play this kind of game with the money, with the funding. And so, yeah, I agree with you on a lot of that, but I do still think that our members deserve to be paid. And I think they need to find a way to get around this, whatever they have to do. We should not be penalized again. We shouldn't go through another shutdown. It's enough.
No, it is. And for me, it means there's so much that needs to be done. We're still fighting with this pandemic. We're still trying to get the economy to recover. We need massive investments for the future of this country. I mean, there's so much that needs to happen, and this is kind of like, for me, the last thing we need at this moment. Which is why I come back to my conclusion that the only thing I can possibly think of, the reason for this, is that this is going to slow down our ability to get anything done, which is going to make Democrats look bad in 2021, 22.
Well, exactly. And then the other part of this is, like, yeah, as you were saying, we're still fighting this pandemic off. So you have COVID issues. You have the CDC that's funded from the government. You've got, all of these different government agencies that are dealing with the pandemic, HHS, all these large entities that get funded in these bills. And, those people, you're going to send all the scientists home. You're going to send the doctors home. What are you doing? We have VA who's treating veterans. Do we want to not fund the Veterans Administration? Do we want to have Veteran Administration employees not paid, having to come to work? And then you look at your safety agencies, ICE, Border Patrol, prisons, TSA. Make them go to work without pay. Again, this is it's just unacceptable at this point to all of us. And I really encourage Congress to find a way here. They've got to find a way to not do this time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are focused on the the minor inconveniences. Oh, they're going to close state parks, and those kind of things are going to happen. But when the Social Security checks stop coming, and Granny doesn't have any food, or when we don't have people showing up to make sure that we have clean water or clean air, or OSHA, the folks who are going to be the ones to enforce this vaccine mandate and safe working conditions on the job, bad things can happen.
Well, I think, as with the last shutdown, at first, nobody really pays a lot of attention. But after about 2 weeks, somebody can't get a passport. Somebody can't do this. Somebody can't do that. And even though you say, national parks, you've got people on vacation probably at Yellowstone right now. You've got people with different national parks across the country. They'll be told on Friday, see you, pack up your stuff. You have to leave the park. That's what happened last time. And people started screaming because maybe they planned for a vacation for 3 years and saved the money. And now, because Congress can't get along and can't figure out how to fund government, that it impacts the public.
Yeah.
And these things, I think last time people got really angry about the Statue of Liberty being closed. I mean, it was just, there was a lot of anger about it because I can remember Park Service employees who we represent telling us how upset, the public was that they couldn't go out to the statue. And it seems like a small thing, but to a lot of people, they save for a couple years to go make that trip.
Yeah.
And then you have something like this happen.
Yeah. Now we're going to be flying here in the beginning part of October. I've got something I have to do in Alaska, and I'm thinking, is it possible the air traffic controllers, aren't going to get paid and they don't come and I don't get to come home? Do I need to start a contingency plan to where I'm going to be, stuck in Alaska for a month? Well, I'm not complaining. My wife's doing the thumbs up, but do I have to start planning for this stuff? Because who knows how long this takes? Who knows how deep this can go? And sadly, this is the kind of uncertainty that you cannot have to run a first world country. This is not how you run a lemonade stand, Phil.
No, and then, last time we were fortunate that we had the flight attendants union, FAA, a number of the transportation unions were with us. And frankly, we had a lot of members, and again, our members are not paid like some people think. They think federal workers are all, we're not all lawyers. We're not all doctors. A lot of people are making GS2, GS3 pay. TSA workers are hourly. Some are part-time. And, we ended up using food banks. We ended up having other unions provide us with assistance for our members. And, now we've reciprocated and tried to help them during their strikes or things that they have going on. But people just, they don't understand that stuff. I get it. But, I don't want to see that again. And none of us. And I really, we're going to be lobbying the rest of this week. We've been lobbying. I know that our members, we're gearing them up with text messages. We're trying to get them to contact their members of Congress that way and by email. So we are pushing those things, and we're gonna try to get this thing stopped by Friday.
Yeah, no, it absolutely needs to happen. So walk me through real quick. I know there are contingency plans in place. I know they've been working through them the last couple of days, as if things are going to shut down. What are the first things that go? I mean, so that we kind of understand, how this process works, this kind of controlled shutdown, how this works. Walk me through a little bit about how you see it working out.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange process, really. Like they're not allowed to authorize leave. They start to call people back in. I know when I worked in the Bureau of Prisons and there were shutdowns in 2013, they actually called us back to work, even though we were on annual leave, but they can't pay out annually. So they start to order you back to work, and we had more staff on site than what we needed to have. They will start to notify agencies to shut down that are, and I call them this only because this is the term that's used. They will start to shut down non-essential agencies, or that's what they call them. Well, those are just agencies that, will remain at home and not be in the office. Under COVID, we may actually keep some people working telework that normally would have been shut down and sent home. I don't know. But that means they're still working without pay. And, if they're kept on, then they're owed. So they start to shut the agencies down. They have contingency plans to shut buildings down, shut off, whole floors, all the things that you have to do. The Park Service starts to shut down exhibit sites, lock them down, all of that kind of stuff happens. And you'll see, by Friday afternoon, you'll see people being sent home, and they will be told not to report back.
But for the big things like Social Security, like the VA, like our military people and the health care that they get, that's not going to be affected right away.
Well, what has happened in the past is those agencies that have these, that like DOD civilians and like VA doctors and nurses, they'll be told to report. Bureau of Prisons will be told to report the work, and all of the law enforcement agencies. The federal meat inspectors will be told to report the work. They just won't be paid. And now, at first you're not going to lose a paycheck for a couple days because you're working off your last 2 weeks, as everybody does.
Right.
It just depends on how deep this shutdown goes. And last time we never thought it was going to get to 35. Prior to that, in 2013, I think it was 16 days. So we had a partial non-payment. We had people getting a partial paycheck. And that hurt too. I mean, they were shocked because that first week's paycheck, they take all the deductions. So, and I had that happen to me early on in my correctional when I was a GS6. We were on a shutdown and opened up the paycheck, and they had taken all my deductions for that week. So I ended up with $150.
Wow.
For a 2-week paycheck.
So last question I've got for you, because, clearly we've got to do something. What's the marching order? What are we telling people?
We are calling Congress. We are hitting the switchboard. There's 2 switchboard numbers for the House and Senate. We are emailing and texting a link to send a note to your member of Congress. Keep the government open. Find a way. We're not, I'm not playing politics with this. Keep the government open. I don't care what you need to do as a congressman, but you need to figure out a way.
Well,
and a senator. And the Senate, mostly Senate.
Right.
As we know, it's the Senate. The House passed the bill to keep the government open. The Senate is, 50-50 Senate. Here we are.
And that idiotic cloture vote is what's holding this up. But Phil, I wish you the best. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Appreciate it, Rick. Take care.
Good stuff. Our good friend Phil Glover, Vice President, AFGE District 3. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Would you be willing to stand up in solidarity with your fellow workers, even if it cost you your job? Well, on this day in labor history, the workers at Mersey Docks and Harbour Company in Liverpool, England, answered that question. The year was 1995. 329 Mersey dock workers refused to cross a picket line that was being walked against another company on the docks. The workers at Torside had been fired for protesting against erosions in job security and increasingly unpredictable scheduling. They were speaking out against the casualization of their labor. When the Mersey dock workers would not cross the Torside picket line, they too were fired. Dock workers across the world stood up in solidarity with the Mersey workers against this unjust treatment. They knew if it could happen in Liverpool, it might happen anywhere. Pickets sprung up from Norway to Japan, from Australia to Italy, and into the United States. It was a global outpouring of solidarity. The strike wore on for 850 days. 1 year into the strike, dock workers held an international day of action in support of the Liverpool workers. Finally, 2.5 years after they were fired, the dock workers agreed to a settlement. They did not get their jobs back, but they did get severance pay. A film was made about the struggle. The proceeds were used to purchase a bar in Liverpool. It is known as the Dockers Pub. and has become a space for working class organizing. The International Dock Workers Council was also born from this strike. Today, the council has 90,000 members, a lasting movement of solidarity. 20 years after the strike, dock workers from across the world gathered in Liverpool to remember the struggle.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some good news this week. And again, I put this in the category of this is Joe Biden's doing. Thanks to the Biden Build Back Better plan, thanks to the rhetoric coming out of this administration about making things in America, reshoring our manufacturing, the Ford Motor Company made what is making their largest investment in manufacturing in this country in 118 years, as they're going to bring a couple of plants to build batteries for the next generation of electric vehicles. They said $11.4 billion of investment. They say this is going to create about 11,000 new jobs in these 3 battery plants. I guess there's 2 in Kentucky, 1 going to be in Tennessee, but we're going to build them here. That's important stuff. And I give credit to Joe Biden and the administration, because it's their push, in my view, that got us there. And here to share some thoughts on, well, this historic announcement, what it means, and what it could mean for the industry as a whole going forward. I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it is great to be with you, especially with some pretty awesome news for manufacturing like this.
So you agree with me? I'm in this place where I'm giving Biden credit for this. I think this is a big part of what's come out of his plan. The push for Buy American, the push for Buy Union, I think is a huge part of this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, ultimately, the company wants to make money. It's not doing this out of any sort of altruism or loyalty. It's going to invest money where it thinks it can make money. And it thinks it can make money by making lithium-ion batteries and electric vehicles in America. And I think you're right. There's a couple of aspects of Biden's policies that I think are pushing companies in this direction. One is building demand, and everything the Biden administration is doing on clean energy, on vehicles, is providing consumers incentives and manufacturers incentives to obviously consumers incentives to buy cars, manufacturers incentives to build them, and to have them built in the United States. So that's number one. Number two, some of the key ingredients in all of this, and batteries is not something we do a lot of now in the United States. In fact, our global market share of batteries is I think 7%, maybe even less. And China's global percentage of lithium-ion batteries is 60% or above. And I think that knowing that this administration wants to wean us off dependence of critical materials like lithium-ion batteries is also pushing investments like this. So I think that's important. The Buy America rules that you talk about, like the fact that these vehicles would be eligible to be purchased by the federal government if they're made in America, is a big thing. And certainly, and I would say this is kind of a continuation of policy from the prior administration, the Democratic Congress. The new rules of the USMCA, that's the trade agreement with Mexico and Canada, will specify that a higher percentage of vehicles to be tariff-free have to be made in America, and the big components especially have to be made in America, and they need to be made with good wages as well. And so I think that is an important factor, and that's obviously something that the Trump administration negotiated with Mexico and Canada, but Nancy Pelosi, other key Democrats, Sherrod Brown, Ron Wyden, pushed them in that direction on some of this. And then the question that I know people are asking is well, are these going to be good jobs? Are these going to be union jobs? Or is this going to be more migration of work from the Midwest to the South. And in Tennessee and Kentucky, it is a more complex question, say, than it is in Alabama, Mississippi, or Georgia.
Right. Because I'll be honest with you, Scott, the first thing when I saw this, I'm going, we couldn't have put this in Detroit and Cleveland or Pittsburgh. It's got to go to Kentucky and Tennessee. You know, I'll be honest. I want strong unionized states to be rewarded with these kind of jobs because they need them. They've been for so long left behind in investment, and I think this is something that we need to help build those communities back up.
Yeah, and hopefully the public officials, the Biden administration, the UAW, and allies will be able to hold the company to account and to neutrality here. It's worth pointing out that Ford has a unionized big plant in Louisville already that manufactures vehicles. GM obviously is not making this investment, but GM has a unionized facility in Spring Hill, Tennessee, and also in Bowling Green, Kentucky. There are also examples of automakers in Kentucky and Tennessee that aren't unionized. Volkswagen and Toyota come to mind, for instance. But there is a fighting chance here, I think, and a reasonably good one. So, but it's a great day. I remember, and Rick, I'm sure you do this too, and this is something that I remember people saying like a decade ago or more, well, manufacturing jobs are never coming back. We're never going to see those big factories again. We're going to never see those big job numbers. It's all going to be robots or made in China, and we're never going to see this again. And I don't know how many times I heard it. I'm sure you heard it too. Every time it made my ears bleed, and it burned my blood too, because I do think with policy that we can get things done, and that's a clear example here. So this positions the United States to assume more global leadership in electric vehicles, in battery manufacturing, which obviously is where this industry is headed. So I'm glad that we're making this investment in the United States as opposed to seeing these companies flee and try to bring the vehicles in from China.
Right. Now I understand that
other places as well.
Yeah, I understand that Ford is partnering with a Korean company, I guess SK. Just as we've seen General Motors, who I guess they're building battery plants in Ohio and Tennessee as well, and they've got a partner, this LG Energy. So we're seeing the kind of investment that we need in this technology, which I hope leads to us making more vehicles here at home. So it makes it a lot easier for me to buy my next vehicle.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, lithium-ion batteries are heavy. They're not easy to ship places. So the assembly of those is going to take place very close to where those batteries are located. That's just kind of the nature of the business. And plus, you get that symbiotic relationship between the innovation, what's working on the plant floor, and there really is no substitute for that. You can't. It's hard to do it when the manufacturing is an ocean away. A lot easier to do it when it's across the street. And so there's all sorts of good business reasons to believe that this kind of model will succeed. And hopefully, now I'm also going to point out that Ford, none of these other companies are perfect. Like the Mach-E, the really cool electric Mustang, it's made in Mexico.
Yep.
Unfortunately. And so we still have a lot of work to do to get more of that production in the United States. But this is a big step forward.
No, I mean, for me, it's the signal in this, and I'm glad you brought up the change in our trade rules. The signal in this for me is that we're no longer just going to be the final assembly place where we slap a name on it and say, hey, it was made in the U.S. Well, we're actually going to be manufacturing stuff, because you hit on it a second ago. Out of that manufacturing facility then comes the next generation of tinkers and innovators and entrepreneurs who are going to change the future. Once you lose those people who go in their garage and go, hey, I can do this differently, I think you lose something.
Yeah, absolutely. You sure do. And that's what, and it creates this whiplash effect that we've seen. We saw the jobs get outsourced. We saw, Wall Street totally bet against American manufacturing, want to push everything overseas. The consequence of that is that manufacturing curriculum, both hands-on and knowledge, taken out of the schools. It's getting its way back in. but you lose that. And so when you build things like this, you develop it, and you develop the research and development too, both the academic research and development, the hands-on research and development, and you'll see these ecosystems develop. And so I'm super excited about it. I mean, there are, this announcement didn't have it, but I mean, there are electric vehicles that are going to be made in Michigan too, which is also exciting. And so I'm not, I think I would have been more disturbed if this was like a Deep South announcement or something like that. But these are places where the GM and the UAW, the car makers and the UAW have been able to have successful efforts together. And so I hope that these plants follow that model.
No, I'm right there with you. And I look at Joe Biden as the most pro-union president of my lifetime, at least. And I hope that the push will be to make sure that those jobs are good, solid, family wage sustaining jobs with union rights and healthcare and all of that stuff, so that we all do better as we all do better. But on this battery front, I'm excited by the fact that this will open up, I think, a whole nother avenue when you start looking at our climate issues with solar panels and energy storage. This can give us, I hope, another leg forward in being able to address those issues, to where, if we're going to put solar panels everywhere, they should be made here, and the storage should be made here to give us the ability to do as much as we can, and also that we benefit from it.
Yeah. And so I think this is a really important question, Rick, because the media likes to play up differences. And one of the differences they like to play up is that, the climate urgency, the fact that we have to bring this on board because to avert a crisis. And in order to do that, we might have to get the cheap stuff from overseas rather than making it in the United States. That's kind of how the argument plays out. The truth of it is we can do both. We have to do both, because it's not going to be acceptable to the American people to simply trade foreign oil for made in China solar panels. And so I do think that this administration understands that and understands that with procurement rules, as you mentioned, with trade rules, with the right demand incentives, that you can make it you can make it cost effective to manufacture these in the United States and pay good wages. And there is absolutely no reason why any solar developer or other one, or other clean energy developer anywhere should need to depend on goods that are made in terrible conditions, sometimes with forced labor, in Xinjiang, China, where a lot of the polysilicon comes for solar panels, or in a way that is harming the environment at the same time that you're trying to solve it. And so having that production in the United States is a win for workers, is a win for the environment, and ultimately is going to be a win for climate, because you're going to build more political support for these efforts if folks see jobs, good jobs in particular, coming along with them.
No, I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping it comes out. I'm hoping it's everything that we're told it's going to be. I hope it's the 11,000 jobs that they're claiming. I hope it's not a Foxconn kind of deal where they're promising 13,000 jobs and we get maybe 100. I'm hoping that these are good family-sustaining wage jobs that help build communities and do the things that we need to do. A good day, in my view. Before I let you go, I understand Thursday you are going to be hosting the Steel Strong virtual roundtable with a couple of members of Congress, some labor leaders. You're going to have our congressman here in Pennsylvania, Connor Lamb, and others talking about why we need strong steel, why we need to make sure that we have it in the steel industry. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And anybody can join in and watch. The link is on our website, AmericanManufacturing.org. This event comes at a critical time because the Section 232 tariffs on imported steel are under review, and they're certainly under attack by the European Union that doesn't think that they should be subject to these tariffs, even though there are more than 30 anti-dumping and countervailing duty cases against metals coming from Europe right now. We have a metals trade deficit with Europe that's substantial. And quite honestly, Rick, Europe hasn't been a reliable partner yet in taking on China. I mean, it needs to step up and do more. And so I think what the CEOs, what Tom Conway, the president of the Steelworkers, is going to say, what members of Congress are going to say, it's like, steel production is coming back in the United States. Now, it's not the Donald Trump 1950s way. It's obviously a lot different than that. But these companies are adding jobs. They're making new investments. They're making investments in decarbonization as we move forward as well. They're excited about contributing to the infrastructure investment that we may be making. They need the tariffs because this problem globally still isn't solved. China makes too much steel. Everybody else tries to replicate that. For U.S. firms that depend on an operating, functioning market, it bites them. And so that's why we have these tariffs in place. And so I think the story that's going to be told is that they've added good jobs, and the jobs in union steel mills are great jobs. They're some of the best middle-class jobs you can find, and they support tons of other jobs in these communities. And so overall, even though steel's a small part of the economy, in a lot of these communities, and you know them in Pennsylvania and Ohio and a lot of these other places, Rick, these communities depend on the steel jobs. Overall, our economy seems to be doing fine. We're adding jobs. We're growing. Obviously, there's equity and other issues that we need to address. But the steel tariffs aren't killing growth. They're not killing jobs. They're not doing anything about that. I mean, companies that consume steel complain about it because they think it cuts into their margins a little bit. But they're all still making a lot of money. They're making a lot of money. And so it's much better to have a steel industry that's thriving and competitive in the United States than to completely depend on China or other countries as we're trying to rebuild the auto industry, the clean energy economy in the U.S. here. We can do it, and so that's one of the messages that I think the participants are going to relay at this Thursday event. I hope folks will have a chance to tune into it.
Yeah, and if they don't catch it live, it'll be there that they can stream it later on. Everything's always there and on demand. AmericanManufacturing.org, that website. And you know me, I'm a big supporter of domestic production, domestic consumption. So keeping a strong steel industry important if we're going to make those batteries, if we're going to make those solar panels, if we're going to build those wind turbines, we need to protect our steel industry. Seems pretty simple to me, and I'm glad that we've got some policymakers that are thinking finally in that direction. So good stuff. But Scott, I appreciate the time. As always, great talking with you.
All right. Rick, thanks for having me on. Appreciate all the great work you do as well.
Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Paul, the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Make sure you check out their website, AmericanManufacturing.org, and check out that virtual roundtable. I think it's going to be an interesting discussion. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1904. A woman was arrested for smoking a cigarette in a car on Fifth Avenue in New York City. While women in the United States are no longer likely to be arrested for smoking cigarettes in public, they continue to face unequal treatment in the labor force. When women started working in factories in the mid-1800s, most notably textile mills, owners paid them far less than men for similar labor. In fact, it was because they saw women as a cheap labor pool that many textile factory owners favored female workers. Today, a woman will earn about 80 cents for every dollar a man earns. Even though women have increased their presence in higher paying jobs traditionally dominated by men, women as a whole continue to work in low paying occupations. Women are about twice as likely as men to say that they've been discriminated against at work because of their gender.
In January of 2009, President Barack Obama signed into law the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. It was named after a woman who fought for 10 years against gender pay discrimination at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. She was awarded a $3 million jury settlement, but that ruling was later overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. The 2009 Act strengthened women's ability to seek legal recourse over pay discrimination. Still, today, the rate of women's compensation lags behind that of men. Labor unions must continue to play a role in fighting against pay inequity.
This union maid was wise to the tricks of the company spies. She'd never be fooled by a company stool. She'd always organize the guys. She'd always get her way. When she asked for better pay, she'd show her.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryint2.com.
Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the union.
Corporate ideologues never cease blathering that government programs should be run like a business. Really? What business would they choose? Pharmaceutical profiteers? Big oil? Wall Street money manipulators? High-tech billionaires? Airline price gougers? The good news is that the great majority of people aren't buying this corporate blather. Instead, valuing institutions that prioritize the common good. Thus, by a 2-to-1 margin, Americans have stunned smug right-wing privatizers by specifically declaring in a recent poll that our U.S. Postal Service should not be run like a business. Indeed, an overwhelming majority, including half of Republicans, say mail delivery should be run as a, quote, public service, even if that costs more. In fact, having proven that this 246-year-old federal agency can consistently and efficiently deliver to 161 million homes and businesses day after day, it's time to let the agency's trusted, decentralized, well-trained workforce provide even more services for our communities. How about Postal Banking? Yes, the existing network of some 31,000 post offices in metro neighborhoods and small towns across America are perfectly situated and able to provide basic banking services to the 1 out of 4 of us who don't have or can't afford bank accounts. The giant banking chains ignore these millions, leaving them at the mercy of check-cashing exploiters and payday loan sharks. The post office can offer simple, honest banking, including small-dollar checking and savings accounts, very low-interest consumer loans, low-fee debit cards, etc. The goal of postal banking is not to maximize corporate profits, but public service. This is Jim Hightower saying, we the people own this public asset. To enable it to work even better for us, go to agrandalliance.org. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Hightower Lowdown. You know who you are. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, a recently released report by the folks at Greenpeace USA shows, I think, what we already know. You got a handful of multinational corporations who are boogering up the planet, mostly looking at Coke, Pepsi, and Nestle. Nestle doesn't get as much attention as they should, even though they're one of the largest water companies in the world, making sure that they sell us enough water. And what they've done over the last several decades, expand plastic production to feed our need for bottled water and other things. That's why I've asked Graham Forbes to come talk with us. Graham is Greenpeace's global plastics project leader. He's also the lead on this report titled The Climate Emergency Unpacked, How Consumer Goods Companies Are Fueling Big Oil's Plastic Expansion. Graham, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, great to be with you, Rick.
I'm looking at this and I'm going, when I was a kid, you had drinking fountains everywhere. The thought of buying a bottle of water, something completely out of bounds. And I remember when bottled water came out, I'm going, why? You got drinking fountains. Yet it has become the dominant thing in our society. And it's horrible for our planet.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the reality is that plastic, single-use plastic, bottled water is really killing us. And I think this report, a lot of people are sort of growing awareness around the plastic pollution crisis. We've seen the pictures of the turtles and the sea life being sort of damaged and killed by this plastic. But what folks don't really know is that all of that comes from fossil fuels and it comes from oil and gas. And companies like ExxonMobil and Shell are really looking to expand that production dramatically to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars over the next few years.
So if we're not going to use plastic, what do we use? I mean, we've gotten our kids into the reusable thing. Everyone's got a water bottle. Everybody you see walking around. When I was a kid, you never worried about, am I hydrated enough? You drank out of a garden hose for sake. But now everyone's got their bottle, and I know I sound like a curmudgeon, but it's one of these things where, do we all have to have our little bottles because we're not, I guess, able to make sure we get a drink when we can? It's weird.
Yeah. That's it. It is weird. And I think, companies like Coca-Cola, they sell you on the idea of this convenience because they get to slap their brand all over it and sort of get marketing everywhere in your face. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's not even convenient because your garbage can's filling up left and right. It's polluting communities, and it's really contributing to climate change in a really dramatic way. And I think that's one of the things that Coke doesn't want folks to know, is that as long as they're using, they sell over 100 billion plastic bottles every year, and that's a huge contributor to climate change.
Now, the argument has been, Graham, that, it's fine because we collect all those bottles. We recycle them. We're good. We're good for the environment. We're doing some recycling. The recycling is the answer, is what I'm told.
Yep. And that really, if folks might not know, recycling is sort of plastics recycling specifically is a myth created by the oil and gas sector and companies like Coca-Cola, because what it does fundamentally is it takes the responsibility they have for producing these toxic materials and then puts it on us and puts it on local governments to clean up the mess. And the reality is we've recycled less than 9% of the plastic that's ever been produced. And there's no way we're going to recycle our way out of this crisis. And so, you got a water bottle, you get a reusable water bottle, you got your kids on it. It's not that complicated. And the companies need to stop selling so much plastic.
Right. So settle a discussion between my wife and I. Because I've been of the mindset for a very long time that the recycling was a bunch of nonsense just to get us, to segregate our garbage. Because, like you said, only a small percentage of it actually gets recycled. But she's almost like that. We got to recycle everything, and everything gets partitioned out. Is recycling, is it helpful? Is it the answer, or is it just an exercise in futility?
Yeah, it's not the answer, and it can be useful as part of the solution. The problem is we've been having the wrong conversation for the past 50 years because that's what Coke wants to talk about, right? Like if you search Coca-Cola on plastic, you're going to get a billion words about recycling because that means they don't have to change anything. They're just going to let you pick it up and clean it. So plastic bottles actually can be recycled, but there's all those other numbers, and it's only ones and twos that actually functionally get recycled at all. And the rest of them, there's basically no market for it because China closed its doors in 2018. It gets burned or landfilled.
Yeah, and that's a terrible thing. So what is the answer here? Because look, nobody's going to give up their Coke and Pepsi or their Dasani water or Aquafina. What is the answer? Look, I would like to go back to where there are drinking fountains around, but advocating for that during a pandemic, probably not the right answer. So where do we go?
Yeah, I mean, like most things that we need to, this is a systemic issue. It's going to require a systemic response. And so we need people to step up and vote for progressive politicians that are addressing climate change. We need to stop the massive build out of petrochemical facilities, make a just transition towards renewable energy sources. And so it's part about being politically active. And the other thing is the companies need to reform and they need to start moving towards reuse. Coke, they have their freestyle machines. You can go into your local restaurant and get a billion different sodas, and you don't need a plastic bottle to do it. You can just put it in a cup. And so it's starting to get creative and really drawing the attention away from the sort of the absolute focus on recycling that's just really good for their bottom line, but never going to solve the problem.
So your solution is, we go into basically for-profit water fountains.
I mean, we need to do something. And I think for Coke to be a business in the future, they're going to have to transition away from plastic because the climate imperative is upon us and we need to take action, and they're just not doing it. Right.
Is there any way that, because I know people, they love the convenience. I'm thirsty, I'm just going to walk in, I'll grab something off the shelf. Is there any way that you transform plastics into some other way, different containers? When I was a kid, everything was glass bottles. We used to run around and steal people's glass bottles and then take them back to the store to get the money for them. Is that a way forward? I'm curious thoughts.
I mean, yeah, the best thing to do is reuse the valuable materials we have. So that's the starting point. But glass, paper are all less problematic than plastic. Plastic is toxic from start to finish, extracted as oil and gas, turned into chemicals, and then, it becomes waste and breaks down for the next 100 years. So our children's get to clean up the mess. And so, yeah, part of it's going to be using other materials, but fundamentally it's just reusing materials that are more sustainable, like glass or aluminum.
Because here's the thing, and this is where I know most people, they want a clean environment. And I believe this. I've only met a couple of cranks who say, I don't care one way or another. I'll be dead before the consequences happen. Like we've stopped using plastic straws because of the turtles. There's a whole bunch of things that you go, okay, we've got to do these things. But, I have some friends who are like, every time we turn around, we're being told something else. Every time we're being, there's another part of our life that we're being told is bad. How do we get past that? How do we move in a way that is more sustainable without beating ourselves up all the time?
Absolutely. I mean, this is not about personal responsibility. Like fundamentally, it's about government stepping up to hold corporations accountable and getting corporate influence out of our democracy, which is across the board. That's a labor issue. That's an environmental issue. Right now, we have an entire party dedicated towards advancing private interests over our collective interests, and that's a huge problem. And so, at the end of the day, it comes down to political power.
No, that's an excellent point that you make, because you see what's going on right now. The last 4 years were some of the worst years for regulatory oversight. You had a president who was very, very clear. We're going to destroy as many regulations as possible, and we're going to transfer as much power to corporate special interests as they can. And this is the kind of thing that we end up with because, as you've pointed out, it's a policy thing. And I like the fact that you brought up that, look, we've been beating ourselves up over recycling and beating ourselves up over all this stuff when we weren't given another alternative.
That's it. And we need other alternatives. And the people that represent us need to stand up, and we need a lot less corporate money in politics.
Yeah. Do you see any, look, I would love to see there be some kind of legislation, some kind of push. Do you see any of that happening in Congress right now? Is there any move to doing what you're talking about?
Yeah, there is. I mean, we have the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act that's sort of making its way through Congress. We know it's never an easy road there, but that's a piece of legislation that puts a moratorium on petrochemical build out and does a number of other good things that help move in the right direction. And we also have the Build Back Better Act that's looking to transition away from fossil fuels more broadly and advance some of the climate interests that are going to be good for communities and ultimately be good for workers too. And I think that's where we'd like to see a lot more movement.
No, I think it's important. And for me, the idea of, as we're moving away from fossil fuels and as we're moving away from a dirty economy, it then comes to the jobs that are created out of this.
Yep.
And I'm hoping that this is an opportunity that maybe we change what our economy looks like for our children so that they're not left with bad choice, the difference between bad choice and worse choice.
That's it. I mean, we need to create jobs and sustainable industries that are good jobs where workers have a voice on the job, a right to organize, collectively bargain, and start to transfer power back to people so we can actually build a middle class and stop sort of letting corporations really extract natural resources to turn a profit and leave the rest of us holding a bag, which is really a dirty planet and a lot of poverty wage jobs.
Yeah, I want to go back to a second about the bottles because, you drive along any highway, you're going to see, hundreds of bottles that have been either thrown out the window or fell off the garbage truck or whatever. How bad is our plastics problem in this, not just in this country, but on this planet? How bad is the problem with as many of these single-use plastic containers that we use?
I mean, they just came out with a study where they found a bunch of microplastics in baby feces. So it's like, I mean, it's literally, it's contaminating, we're at risk of permanently polluting the natural environment with broken down plastic pellets. It's in our bodies, it's in our blood. I mean, we're literally surrounded by it. It's transferring disease in parts of the world. I mean, so we are, it's bad. and it's only getting worse because production, if Exxon has its way, it's going to grow production by 20 or 30% and put us in an even worse position. But I think with our report, as we start to understand it as a systemic issue, start to understand the system, we can start to make better choices and have different conversations about real solutions.
And policy choices. Because look, I've said for a long time, and I know I sound like just an old guy complaining about how things have changed, but the idea that we're going to buy water for more than the cost of a gallon of gas is insane, and we're gonna drink it out of a container that we're going to use once and throw away, that'll be here probably 100 years after I'm dead, just seems like really not a great idea.
Spot on. It's common sense. It's a bad idea, and it doesn't pass the smell test. I mean, it's just like, it's ridiculous. Yet you still, like, I see so many commercials about recycling. Go to Coke's website and they can't talk about it enough, and it's a joke.
Yeah, but again, I think back to the when I was a kid, though, and this is going way back. We had the guy who was dressed up like a Native American guy with a tear coming down his eye. Yeah. When I found out that was funded by corporate interests, yes, and it wasn't an environmental ad at all, I was beyond furious.
Yes. Plastics recycling is one of the best corporate lies that's ever been told, because it makes you want to believe it, because it gives you a sense of agency. But what it does under that is really transfers responsibility to you for a problem that you can never address if companies keep acting the way they are.
No, it's just, and it comes back down to the money in our political system. I mean, right now we can't seem to get some sane things done that we need. We need massive investments in infrastructure, and we need even bigger investments in moving our economy to a much cleaner, more climate-friendly economy. And yet we can't seem to get anything passed. So I look at what you're talking about, of making these companies just do some sane things, and I'm going, well, that's not possible. We can't do the things we want to get done, let alone the things we don't know anything about.
I mean, that's true, Rick. We got work to do, but I think at the end of the day, we got to keep the faith and just keep pushing, because there is reason to be hopeful, because as the problem gets worse, more and more people are waking up. And the reality is the vast majority of Americans agree with these common sense changes. So there's obviously something clogging the system, and I think corporate money is a big part of it.
Yeah. So what kind of response have you gotten from this report you guys have put out? And I hope folks will take a look at it over at greenpeace.org/USA. It's called the Climate Emergency Unpacked: How Consumer Goods Companies Are Fueling Big Oil's Plastic Expansion. That's at greenpeace.org/USA. Go through this with me a little bit. What kind of response are you getting?
It's been good. I mean, I think for a lot of these companies, it's been a huge wake-up call, because they like to position themselves as friendly, climate-friendly companies. Coke doesn't put itself in the same category as an Exxon, and likes to believe they're going to exist long into the future. And so I think what we've accomplished with this is sort of reframing the conversation, looking much more at the source, talking about reuse and how they're going to really transition towards new business models. And so we've been pleased with that. We're doing lots of shows and kind of just getting the message out there that plastics is a climate problem as well as a pollution problem in its own right. And so we need to start looking at systemic solutions.
So just so we're clear, we were not talking about, having to drink out of our hands in the future, though.
Is it? We can do this.
I get some of my friends who go, oh, you tree huggers, you're all the same. You want us just standing around looking at each other and not having any economy. And that's not what you're talking about here.
No, not at all. And I mean, these things are compatible. And the dichotomy, this false dichotomy about environmental interest versus, actually having economic, that is put forward by corporate America to keep us from making true progress, distributing wealth, and building an environment that works for everyone and an economy that works for everyone. So don't believe that. Yeah.
So while you're the global plastics project leader at Greenpeace, you're also a former labor guy like me, who wants people to have good family sustaining wage jobs with health care, with retirement security, and with job security. And I don't think you want to put people out of work. I think you want people to live decent lives.
It's fundamental. I mean, when we talk about system redesign, it needs to start with the people who are working in these sectors and making sure that they can have jobs that can actually take care of their family, right? Yeah, all the things you just said. We've watched corporate America just infiltrate the government in a way that has, really been destructive for working class families. And, it's egregious, and we're getting to a point where I feel like there's going to be energy, and we're going to start to see some change because it's just gone too far.
So as a labor guy, any pushback from the labor folks on this? Because I know there are some people who do push back.
Yeah, no, and we haven't had any, we work with the Teamsters, we work with UFCW, and we work with other unions. I mean, because at the end of the day, again, public interest, environmental interest, workers' rights, these are things that we share, and the values are there. And I think, we're stronger together. And, I've had a lot of progress working on both sides in both of these movements to build power.
Yeah, ultimately, the reality is if we're going to leave anything for our children worth having, we've got to probably start acting now and make sure that not only do they have jobs to have in the future, but also an environment that they'll want to live in anyway. But Graham, I appreciate the time, the work that you guys do. Good stuff. Hope folks will take a look at it. The Climate Emergency Unpacked, how consumer goods companies are fueling big oil's plastic expansion, greenpeace.org/USA. Graham, thanks so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Rick. You take good care. I love your show.
Thanks so much. Give me your thoughts. What do you think? Is it a good idea, bad idea? Do you recycle? I'd love to hear it. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day the Delano Grape strike began in California. The strike came a year after activists had forced Congress to end the Bracero contract labor program. The Filipino Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, led by Larry Idalong, Philip Vera Cruz, and others, called the strike against the Delano growers and the Coachella Valley grape growers. It had been a record harvest. Farm workers demanded higher wages, humane working conditions, and union recognition. When the growers refused, thousands walked out of the fields. A week later, the Mexican-American National Farm Workers Association, led by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, joined the strike. It was a historic moment. Within a year, the two unions would merge to form the United Farm Workers. The union sent strikers to the Oakland docks to persuade the longshoremen not to load non-union grapes. Many of the Filipino workers in the San Joaquin Valley worked in the Alaska fish canneries organized by the ILWU in the off-season. And so the ILWU honored their union brothers' request. Thousands of cases of grapes were left to rot on the docks. This initial victory led Chavez to organize a grape boycott against heavyweights DeGiorgio and Shenley Industries. 6 months into the strike, union leaders marched 300 miles from Delano to Sacramento to bring attention to their struggle. They hoped to pressure growers to the negotiating table and legislators to act on their behalf. For 5 years, the strike and boycott continued with marches, organizing, and picket line arrests. Gradually, the UFW began winning higher wages, union recognition, and hiring halls. Finally, in 1970, a collective bargaining agreement covering 10,000 workers was reached.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Wells Fargo got slapped with a little bitty fine. They've agreed to pay $72.6 million to settle their overcharging and misleading of customers. Evidently, between 2010 and 2017, people who were doing some foreign exchange stuff, you go in and say, hey, I'm going to this country, exchange my money for this money. Evidently, they were instructing the customer service people to, charge you a higher rate. And it's one of those little kind of cheaty, scammy things that you would expect a kid to do, maybe working at a gas station. You wouldn't expect a massive financial institution to try and pull the wool over people's eyes. But evidently, what they were doing is, let's say you were purchasing a euro, and this is the example that they gave. And for $1 it would cost a $1.01, like 123 cents. So $1, 0.0123. What they would charge you is $1, 0.0213. So it'd be just a little tweak, just a little bit. I mean, literally fractions of a penny. But when you're talking about the kind of volume that they're talking about, it brought in tens of millions of dollars in cheat fees. And they called it the big figure trick. I guess was one of the things. And if a savvy customer goes, hey, wait a second, that wasn't the right number, that math doesn't add up, they would simply go, oh, gee, must have been a typo, and then they'd correct it. And they got away with this for 7 years before some people filed a lawsuit. And the $72.6 million is going to be split between, I guess, half of the money is going to be the $35.3 million will go to 771 customers that I guess are the ones who figured out that they could go back and sue, the ones that they say were affected by the fraud. And then the rest of it, the 37.3, will go to the U.S. Treasury, I guess, because these are civil penalties that they have to pay for violating financial regulations. And I'm looking at this and going, almost $73 million sounds like a slap on the wrist. I would really like to know how much this scam actually brought in. And then for me, I would go, okay, let's go back and figure out how much it brought in. And then we triple the fine based on what you brought in so that you don't do it again. So that it's not just a little, slap on the wrist. Well, don't do it again. Promise not to. Go post a notice. It's crazy. It's crazy times, I'm telling you. But the fact that they're going to walk out with that kind of, predictable. Very, very predictable. Now remember, Wells Fargo's with the bank that got into a whole bunch of problems and a whole bunch of other making up fake accounts, doing all kinds of things to fleece their members or their customers. But hey, it's corporate America, man. Here's some interesting news for TV buffs and film folks. We're on the brink of a estimated 60,000 television and film crew workers with IATSE, the International Alliance for Theatrical Stage Employees. They could go on strike starting on October 1st, as you have these crew members who work on union productions, both film and television, fighting for better wages, hours, conditions. Hours mostly. And this is one of those things where I go, I've known for a long time, and I've known people who worked on film crews who tell of just the grueling hours. You're there 12, 14, 16 hours a day, every day during the shoot. And while the actors, they have long days too, but it's the people who have to set up and then sit and wait for all of that stuff to happen and be on beck and call in case something goes wrong, and then stay afterwards to tear it all down and put it away. Those are the folks who are the ones behind the scenes. Those are the IATSE members. And what they're saying is, look, we're coming out of this pandemic, and this is bad. We don't want to go back to the way things used to be. And we're I think going to see a lot more of this stuff from people who used to, hey, this is just how it is. It's how it always is. The abuse that we're taking, we've taken over the years. It's part of the gig. It's what you have to put up with. I think they're kind of going to be interesting because, look, that they work in grueling hours, long hours, low wages, all of this stuff. And because of the pandemic and what we've lived through, they're saying maybe enough is enough. So you could see, union cinematographers, editors, makeup and hairstylists, writers, camera operators, all those folks. You could see Hollywood on strike come October 1st. So October 1st is going to be an interesting day. We could shut down the government, and Hollywood could shut down because, as we're finding out, the film studios are racing to get things back out. Because you had that period where nothing was getting done. They want to catch up. And how do they do it? Well, they do it by exploiting their workforce. And these workers are saying, nope. Not going to do it. It'd be interesting to see how this plays out. In fact, we're going to work on getting some folks here on the program to talk about this in the coming days, because I think this kind of stuff is important. that people are finding their voice, they're finding commonality, they're organizing together, they're standing in solidarity, and they're saying, you know what, we want things to get better. That's simple. I'm excited to see what happens. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
The storm's 150-mile-an-hour winds wreaked havoc on offshore oil production platforms, as well as onshore oil and gas processing plants.
Hurricane Ida's destruction caused a record number of oil spills in the Gulf of Mexico. Today's children face more climate disasters than their grandparents, new study warns. Plus,
11 felony charges and 20 misdemeanors. Charges include 4 homicides.
California utility PG&E charged in wildfire that killed 4.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
A new report says that animals are shape-shifting in response to the climate crisis. Same here. These aren't love handles, okay? Before the sea levels rise, I'm growing my own water wings.
I know the feeling. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, well, the Republicans in the Senate are trying to destroy the country and the global economy, basically, but they're also screwing over a bunch of natural disaster victims right now.
Yes, they are. On Monday, Senate Republicans blocked legislation to suspend the debt ceiling, which pays for spending already incurred, and to keep the government in operation, which also blocked emergency disaster aid for victims of Hurricane Ida.
Well done, Republicans.
Speaking of Hurricane Ida, NOAA reports that the deadly storm, which made a direct hit on Louisiana and caused billions of dollars in damages, also caused an unprecedented number of oil spills in the Gulf of Mexico. 55, a new record. The new analysis underscores the fragility of the oil industry's aging infrastructure on the Gulf Coast as hurricanes become more intense and extreme due to man-made global warming caused by the oil industry.
Ironic, ain't it?
Back to Congress, an intense time for President Joe Biden's climate agenda as Democratic congressional leaders work to feverishly forge a path forward with a handful of so-called moderate Democrats on Biden's Build Back Better Act reconciliation package as Republicans throw wrenches into the machinery. DeSmog Blog reports that the oil industry has launched an all-out pressure campaign to kill off a proposal by congressional Democrats to tax the industry for the first time for its methane leaks, an extremely powerful greenhouse gas, in order to fund climate programs.
And they don't like that for some reason?
They don't. And it matters because a new study projects that even if countries fulfill their current pledges to cut greenhouse gas emissions, children born in 2020 will, on average, endure 7 times more extreme heat waves and more than twice as many droughts over their lifetimes as their grandparents.
Wow.
Today's children will also see almost 3 times as many river floods and crop failures and twice the number of wildfires as people born 60 years ago.
Sorry, kids. We tried.
And that is on average. Increases in exposure will be much higher in some countries. It's the first research to assess how climate extremes will affect different age groups and highlights the intergenerational injustice posed by the climate crisis.
Grim.
In other news, in Northern California, prosecutors have charged electric utility giant Pacific Gas and Electric with 4 counts of homicide and multiple other felonies for its role in causing the 2020 Zog fire near Redding, which killed 4 people and destroyed hundreds of homes.
Of course, no one will go to jail, even if they are found guilty. They have been charged before with manslaughter, and I cannot believe the state has not taken over PG&E at this point and put them out of our misery.
State fire investigators found the Zog fire was sparked by a dying tree that PG&E knew was dangerously close to its transmission lines. Here's Shasta County District Attorney Stephanie Bridget.
If you've got a known hazard that sits for 2 years, it's just not an accident. They knew it was there, they left it, they didn't remove it, and people died.
Last year, the company pleaded guilty to 84 counts of manslaughter over a 2018 blaze that destroyed the town of Paradise.
Why not? No one's going to jail.
But some good news.
Good.
In Germany, a good sign for climate policy after the country's center-left party, the Social Democrats, narrowly defeating retiring Chancellor Angela Merkel's Conservative Party in federal elections, with the environmentalist Green Party coming in a very strong third. Here in the U.S., the Biden EPA has issued major rules to cut HFCs, greenhouse gases used in refrigeration that are hundreds of thousands of times more powerful than CO2. The new standards are widely backed by industry and will ultimately cut HFCs by 85% over the next 15 years. Finally, Norway has set a national target of 2025 to ban sales of new gasoline and diesel vehicles.
Wow.
But it turns out on its current trajectory, the country is on track to reach 100% electric vehicle sales as early as April.
Wow.
Yes.
Well done, Norway. It can be done. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I'm looking at what's going on down in Florida. And again, the policies coming out of that place are just crazy. And I keep hoping that out of the insanity we see from the Ron DeSantis's and the Marco Rubios and the rest of them, the Matt Gaetzes, that some sanity will eventually rise up. And maybe the Florida man will actually be a decent guy who has some thoughts of others. And maybe it's the next generation. And here to share some thoughts on what that could look like, a representative of Gen Z. I've asked Jack Cacciella, I'm going to get it, Cacciarella, to come talk with us. I got it right. He is the digital guy for Retire Marco and Remove Ron. He's also the co-host of Zoomed In podcast. Jack, thanks for taking time for us.
And thank you so much for having me on the show. I am so excited to be here. Really talk Florida and talk, what needs to be fixed in Florida, because there's so much of it. We are the Sunshine State. We have a bright future, but that's not going to be under Republican leadership. So if we can make a couple of changes here and there, it's going to do our state well. And I know that we have a bright future ahead.
No, and I'm hopeful. I mean, I've been following you for a little while, and the hope is that you take Florida man to the next step, because whenever we hear the man from Florida, it's always something really, really bad. So when I see you trying to grab that, I'm going, maybe we're going to start seeing some things that are really good.
Yeah, I always say that, I'm not like Florida man. I am a man from Florida, though. I'm not maybe the alligator wrestling, running into a Walmart, lighting things on fire. Those type of headlines that you usually see coming out of Florida sometimes that are attributed to that stereotype. But I'm a man from Florida, more focused on how we can better our state. And that's going to come, a lot of that is going to be in 2022. We have huge opportunities to take the next steps in showing how we want our state to be represented, whether that be at the state level in our local elections, whether that be given, Ron DeSantis the boot that he deserves, or whether that be in saying goodbye to spineless Marco Rubio, showing that Floridians actually deserve some real representation, because there's a lot ahead for our state, and we can be extremely successful if we make that pivot now.
And ultimately, it's going to come down to your generation showing up next year. At the end of the day, we saw a reasonable turnout of the younger generation here in this last election, but the midterms always seem to be a little trickier. And with some of the craziness that we've seen recently, the hope is that your generation, who has some significant problems waiting for them down the road, start saying, maybe we start fixing some of this stuff now.
Yeah, and that's something that we can definitely see, maybe in Florida more so than another state. And something that I always assure everyone of is that elections in Florida are tight. In 2018, the margin of victory for Ron DeSantis was not as huge as you might think it was, about 40,000 votes there. And so if we see the turnout that I expect and my friends expect from Gen Z and other young people in Florida, we're looking at shrinking and then beating that small margin. Because in 2020, we saw the power of our voices. And right now we are seeing that our representatives will respond to us when we demand action. And that action can only be called for if we're showing up to vote. And we're showing them why it is important that our voices be heard, because we will deliver for them as well. So I see great promise in how young people are going to be able to turn out in 2022 and just carry that energy also into 2024 and beyond as well, whether that be running for in local elections or organizing or having our voices heard in every way possible to make sure that what we want is front of mind for people running for office right now.
Yeah, we hear this a lot. We're fighting for what we want, and a lot of people. You've got voices all over the political spectrum. But your generation, what seems to be the issues that are front and foremost for you and your friends?
Yeah, and I think that when most people think of what Gen Z wants and what younger people want, they go directly to climate. And, I think that's the right approach. But I think that we understand the way to be pragmatic in solving our problems. And we know that a stronger economy and a better future for our climate can go hand in hand. And we know that we can solve those issues in the same way. So we are willing to work with the conventional ideas of what policy, maybe the Biden administration wants to be put in place, but bringing our ideas for what a better climate looks like and tying those together. So climate is usually what's going to be front of mind for us. But what we really want to focus on as well is protecting our ability to have our voices heard. So that's passing voting rights legislation as soon as possible to make sure that our elections are protected. Because although the 2020, we just saw this in Arizona, although the 2020 election, the GOP is trying to still relitigate that over and over again. What they're not trying to do is overturn 2020. What they want to do is overturn 2022. So that's where we want to be focused, saying that we see what you're trying to do. We're gonna call the bullshit. We know what's happening. This is in preparation for something else. We're not letting that happen. So we have our eyes not only focused on the future of our climate and of our planet, but the future of our elections, so we can make sure our voices are heard.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about the Republicans is they don't try and hide anything. They're usually pretty right out in front. If they're going to steal something,
they'll tell you.
They'll be happy to tell you. And look, this has been our problem for a long time. Democrats have not organized in the same ways. They haven't pushed in the same ways, and they've been too nice. I've said for too long, Democrats show up to a fight offering to hold somebody's coat and not willing to ball up their digits and roll around in the mud.
Yeah, and that's something that I do my best in trying to be part of that change, saying that and you're right, we have been too kind in our messaging. We have been too timid in our messaging. We don't really want to necessarily brag about ourselves, but we should. And more so than just doing that, we need to be calling out the hypocrisy and the straight up lunacy of the GOP. So when Marco Rubio does something that's ridiculous, I'm happy to call him. I'm happy to call him on it. And I'm happy to, maybe poke a little fun at him in the process. I'll throw up an image of Marco next to a jellyfish because it's true. The man is spineless. And I don't care about saying that because it's true. And sometimes when we put these elected officials on pedestals and they want to be treated as kings and queens, it's okay to knock them down a little bit with a little bit of satire. It doesn't hurt.
Yeah, it's not just okay, Jack. It's not just okay. It's mandatory because politicians aren't kings and queens. They're tools to get the things that we need done.
And that's how we need to be viewing these things. These are our representatives. If they're not representing us, then things need to change. They can be defeated if that's what we want. And I think that's a point that we need to make infinitely clear, that these things don't have to be systemic. We don't have to have this rut in Florida specifically, where we've had 2 decades of Republican leadership in Tallahassee. These things can change, and we can make our state better.
Yeah. Now you do this fantastic podcast, you and another co-host, the Zoomed In podcast, and good stuff. I'd like to get your thoughts on, to this point, what do you think of the Biden administration, what they've done thus far, any stumbles you see, anything that you've thought wanted differently?
So what I see right now is that there is probably a bit too much of playing into the perceived politics that a Kirsten Sinema or Joe Manchin would want. I think giving a little bit too much in the hand of saying this is sort of fake bipartisanship a lot of the times is what's happening when Republicans want to act like they're coming to the table, but they're not. Look at the police reform talks that just fell apart with Senator Cory Booker and Tim Scott. Cory Booker was coming to the table. The Democrats were coming to the table. They wanted actual change. Republicans did.
Right.
They have no incentive to do anything. It's clear. It's come down from the top from Mitch McConnell saying that I do not want to help Joe Biden. I would rather see a global economic collapse than Joe Biden have a victory. They have zero incentive to do anything.
Right. And we saw that back during the Obama term where they came out and said, we're going to make him a one-term president. You had Limbaugh, the titular head of the party, saying, I hope he fails. These are scorched earth people. And look at right now, the current talk of another government shutdown during a pandemic when the economy's struggling to move along. They want to throw a wrench into this because they believe in scorched earth. And again, Democrats don't. And that's how they end up getting put in these positions.
The only time that we've seen Republicans actually try to be a part of the process of governing was with the Biden infrastructure bill, right? 19 Republicans voted yes on that. Marco Rubio was not one of them, of course, because he refuses to do anything or ever show up and do his job. But 19 Republicans voted yes. Now, that wasn't a moment of bipartisanship. That was a moment for some Republicans to be able to point to and say, hey, if you give us the keys, we can govern. But they can't. And they've clearly shown in all other instances that they can't. And so I think we maybe need to spend a little bit less time with, I believe that there can be compromise. I don't think there can be necessarily compromise all that much with this current iteration of the GOP. And I think there needs to be a little bit more focus. And I think that's going to be coming in the next couple of days from President Biden and getting into those discussions with Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. I know they've had meetings where they come to the White House and they talk things out. And I think that can lead to substantial change and actually making something happen. So I think a little bit more presence by the president would be helpful. But with what the administration has currently done, I think they have been successful, and I think they will continue to be successful. But I think they just need to be ready to strong arm a couple of representatives into doing what the country wants, right? If you have a politically popular agenda and you were elected to pass it, then you need to pass it, right? This is what people want. And I think they should be making that infinitely clear with their messaging and how they communicate to other members of the party.
Yeah, but Jack, I mean, there are things that are infinitely popular all the time that never see the light of day because the moneyed interest in this country to make sure it never sees the light of day. Most of this Build Back Better plan, overwhelming majorities of the population see as something that we need. This is almost a 40-year reset, in my view, of some of the bad policies that got us to this point. But yet you've got someone like Joe Manchin, who I do believe down the road will vote for something. He's just he wants his attention, and like a child who probably wasn't breastfed enough, he needs his attention. Sinema, I don't know. I think there's some other problems there where I think she would be willing to blow up the whole thing.
I know. So obviously she's trying to brand herself in some way, right? She wants a brand as
I don't know if crazy's a good brand.
But I don't know what the brand is. Like, is the brand I am Democratic Mitch like, am I the Democrat Mitch McConnell? Like, I don't know what the brand is. And not only you obviously have loud critics on the left saying this is like, what are you doing? But you also have the state party in Arizona saying, if you blow up this bill, there will be consequences. Like, that is your state party. Going back to what I said about representing the people who sent you there, that's your party being explicitly clear and saying, this is what we want. Let's go and make it happen. There are 50 Democrats. We can pass this thing. It's tremendously popular. Not only, let's put aside like the political popularity, and let's talk about how successful this will be in making the lives of the working people in America better. Like, let's focus on that.
Yeah.
Let's step aside from this poll says 66% popularity. This poll says 72 or 63%. It'll make people's lives better. Like, let's talk about that, Kirsten Sinema. It'll make people's lives better. So do you want to step up and do that? Do you want to do what you were sent to do? Like, what is the deal? What is branding yourself as someone who's like potentially going to lose a primary more important than actually helping people? I honestly don't know what she's doing.
No, but the weird thing is I look at Manchin, I look at Sinema, and I know that there are others behind them that are causing little little fires to be set all around as well. And I don't give them a pass either. But at least I hope that Biden will be able to pull them in. Cinema is the wild card in all this. And is it your view, like I believe, that if we don't get anything, if we don't get the at least something for the Build Back Better plan, and I'm of the mindset you take $1.5 trillion if you can get it, just to get it passed through and put into law. If we don't get either, I think 2022 is going to be a really long year.
I don't necessarily think that if we pass all of this incredible legislation, it means that we're set and golden for 2022.
Nope. No.
There's still a lot of work to be done. We still have to continue to be successful. We still have to pass sweeping voting rights legislation. There's a lot of work to do. But if we don't pass anything, it will be a massive failure. And I don't necessarily see how we recover from that. I just don't.
Because where I wanted to go with this is, obviously, you're more in tune with Generation Z than I am. And I'm really curious of where the mindset is going, because if we don't get voting rights, put into law, if we don't pass something to address what you said is the number one issue, climate change, do you guys just stay home? Do you say, hey, 2020 was the year we were supposed to solve this. We gave you what you needed. You didn't do anything. We're going to go elsewhere.
Well, this goes to a discussion that I think is going to continue to happen, is going to pick up soon, which is, how do we brand the midterms? Do we say this is preventing more crazy GOP, a little bit of what happened in California? Larry Elder could be your governor. You cannot possibly have that. So do you want to talk about more of the nutso crazy Boebert, Cawthorn Greens, or do you want to say, look how successful we've been, right? You got to do both, but which one is more of a winning political strategy? You could potentially say it's look at our successes, but if we don't have any successes, then we can't run on that message. So I'm not sure that it necessarily ensures that young people won't turn out in the numbers that I expect them to, but it doesn't do us any favors. I can guarantee that. And I think progressives may start to get a little tired of giving up what they want for the sake of compromise, when they know what they want is not only popular, but will be successful in helping Americans everywhere. So I think there's going to be a little bit of we're tired of giving up what we want. And I think that is very damaging for the party.
Yeah, ultimately, the messaging of, well, we didn't get anything done because we didn't have enough votes, I don't know is going to fly this time around. We'll see. I'm hoping. I'm still being told by my sources that we're going to get both bills pushed through eventually. It's not going to be $3.5 trillion, but it's not going to be $1 trillion either. And I'm of the mindset you take what you can get moving, and then you build on into the future. But I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, I think there has been some, I think at least coming from the White House, there's been some optimism that maybe it's not going to be this week, but next week all the cards can fall into place and we can move forward. Maybe there will be a compromise. But the biggest issue here, when we're talking about a compromise on what? Is it a compromise on the actual substance of the bill, or is it a compromise on the price tag? Because I think that's more what Joe Manchin is worried about, less of where the money's going, and just what the money is. I think he wants just a smaller bill, but doesn't really want to tell us what's in the bill.
Yeah.
Which makes this whole discussion more difficult.
No, I completely agree with you.
Want.
I completely agree. It's that pretending they care about fiscal responsibility, when the reality is we allow the wealth class of this country to walk away with untold fortunes that we don't even consider. And yet we can't get the pothole filled out in front of my house. Yeah. Kids can't get an education. It's crazy stuff. But obviously something we're going to continue to talk about in the coming weeks and months. It was great talking with you. I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts with us in the future.
I absolutely will. Thank you so much for having me on. It's great.
Keep up the great work there on the Zoomed In podcast. I hope folks will take a look at it. We'll get links out on social media how you can check that out. You can check out Jack Cocciarella and the Zoomed In podcast. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. The talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Would you be willing to stand up in solidarity with your fellow workers, even if it cost you your job? Well, on this day in labor history, the workers at Mersey Docks and Harbour Company in Liverpool, England, answered that question. The year was 1995. 329 Mersey dock workers refused to cross a picket line that was being walked against another company on the docks. The workers at Torside had been fired for protesting against erosions in job security and increasingly unpredictable scheduling. They were speaking out against the casualization of their labor. When the Mersey dock workers would not cross the Torside picket line, they too were fired. Dock workers across the world stood up in solidarity with the Mersey workers against this unjust treatment. They knew if it could happen in Liverpool, it might happen anywhere. Pickets sprung up from Norway to Japan, from Australia to Italy, and into the United States. It was a global outpouring of solidarity. The strike wore on for 850 days. 1 year into the strike, dock workers held an international day of action in support of the Liverpool workers. Finally, 2.5 years after they were fired, the dock workers agreed to a settlement. They did not get their jobs back, but they did get severance pay. A film was made about the struggle. The proceeds were used to purchase a bar in Liverpool. It is known as the Dockers Pub and has become a space for working class organizing. The International Dock Workers Council was also born from this strike. Today, the council has 90,000 members, a lasting movement of solidarity. 20 years after the strike, dock workers from across the world gathered in Liverpool to remember the struggle.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I gotta tell you, this CEO, and we've talked about this guy before. His name is Dan Price. He's the guy you may remember a number of years ago, and it's been several years, who said he's not going to pay any of his employees less than $70,000 a year. And he's hired a bunch of people, and everyone said, your company's going to go down the tubes. You're done. You're going to be out of business. Well, actually, his company has thrived. And he said, look, I'd rather hire somebody with a couple years experience than somebody with college. I want people who are passionate. I want people who are willing to work, and I'm going to pay them well. And it's this kind of mindset that I find we need more of our CEO class. And so he tweeted out today something I found quite interesting. He pointed out that the CEOs of like Chipotle, who made $38 million last year, or Burger King, and who made $20 million, or Starbucks, who made over $14 million, or down the list of all of these fast food restaurants and the millions of dollars that their CEOs are being paid. He says, but yes, your order costs more because of the $1 an hour raise that the workers got. And I thought that was the right messaging. Look, so much of what's going on in this country has been the wealth class sucking, just sucking out the wealth right out from under us, and then making us blame each other for the fact that inflation's happening, costs are going up. It's just one of those things that I saw that I had to point it out. It's infuriating. Now, the folks over at the Economic Policy Institute, EPI, they've done a report. They say that if the minimum wage were to increase to $15 an hour, if we increase the federal minimum wage by 2025, it's still a couple years down the road, that pay increase would be, the number was staggering. Nearly 2 million direct care workers would see an increase in their wages. Nearly 50% of the people who take care of our most vulnerable. And over the weekend, we do our call-in show on WBAI in New York City. We had a woman call in and say, look, I can't get at my home health aid. She was blind. They send her to a freaking website. You go, but she's blind, you morons. Because you didn't have a code, and all these obstacles and these hurdles. and just trying to get somebody to come help read her mail, come help do things to help her. And yet we have these obstacles, and the wages that the workers are making are basically poverty wages. So they're saying, look, if we could bump that up, you'd have almost 2 million of these people who take care of our most vulnerable, being able to support themselves, getting a little bit of bump, being able to make ends meet. And yet here we are in this weird kind of space where the sad reality is, as they point out, more than 5 out of every 6 direct care workers would have higher take-home pay in 9 states. Places like Mississippi, where 90% of the home health care workers would make more because the wages are set that low. And you look at this and you go, yeah, they're all no rights at work states. They're all the states that don't allow workers to unionize and fight them at every turn when they do. I think there's a message there. I think there's something there. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, at Rick Smith Show. Give us a like over on Facebook. Subscribe over on YouTube. Lots of ways to get a hold of the program. Also, love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you send us that email. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show.